they've never done that before. As a dog owner, have you heard other dog owners say that to you? I'm absolutely certain at some point or other. We've all heard it, haven't we? Something happens and the other owners look so shocked and they go, they've never done that before. I don't know where that's come from. Now, it can be very easy for us to go, I'm sure they say that to everybody. I'm sure they have seen that before. Now, the reality is for a lot of owners, I genuinely believe they have not seen their dog do that behaviour before. So I always like to think, let's give owners grace. Let's give them some grace. If they're saying their dog has never done that before, then let's help them. They need help. Something has happened for that dog to choose that particular behaviour in that particular moment. And I've got two stories that I want to share with you of two separate dogs where something very serious happened, very severe, very totally unexpected. The owners had no idea that these outcomes were going to happen. And it all comes down to one very, very important aspect when it comes to dog behaviour. And it's known as the dog's stress bucket. Now, you may be familiar of the stress bucket with us as humans. So literally imagine you have got a bucket and you've got lots of different glasses of water. You might have big pint glass, you might have a little shot glass, you might have a little small sort of glass size. You might also have the garden hose. Now, different parts of our daily lives will pay into our stress bucket. And you may find that you get to the point where your bucket has got quite full. And then something else happens and your bucket is this far off being full, something else happens and it overflows. Now, for us as humans, that quite often can be an emotional outburst. Bucket overflow, can't cope anymore, emotional outburst. For dogs, that quite often will be an undesirable behaviour, like sudden barking, sudden lunging, sudden chasing another dog, recall failing. There's a whole plethora of outcomes that could happen for our dogs. So let's look at what fills a bucket. Now, we'll look at human buckets and dog buckets, and we'll kind of sort of mix them up a little bit, because I also think as dog owners, it's really important that we can look after our own buckets as well as looking after our dog's buckets. So for us, for instance, I'll give you the scenario. You wake up in the morning and you come downstairs and maybe you've got a cat or a couple of cats and you find a couple of dead animals in the kitchen and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't want to have to deal with this. That's a little bit of stress into your bucket. I'm saying that only because that happened to a friend yesterday. And yeah, she sent me quite an interesting voice note on it. And that filled her bucket quite a bit, that did, because she just did not want to have to deal with that. You then think to yourself, right, I'm going to get ready to go for a walk. You look outside, you think, yep, okay, clear skies, I'm going to go out for a walk. You go out, you're out for 10 minutes and all of a sudden it starts raining and you're thinking, oh, I didn't put my waterproofs on. And you get home, and by the time you get home, you're drenched. Dogs soaked, they're not so fussed. You are though. So again, that's a little bit of bad stress into your bucket. And then maybe you come home and you think, oh, I've got a nice lunch planned with a friend. So you get yourself changed, you get yourself warmed up, dried up, and you get yourself all ready and you think, oh, what am I going to have for my lunch? And you get to the cafe where you're meeting your friend for lunch and all the tables are full. And you're thinking, oh, okay. And they say, well, we might have a table in about another 10 minutes. You're really hungry at this point. You didn't have much for breakfast because you were looking forward to your nice lunch. And if you're like me and you get a little bit hangry, then that's starting to take hold a little bit. You then get a seat, you sit down, you place your order, and they suddenly come over and they say, oh, we're really sorry. We've just realised the soup that you've ordered, we're out. And you're thinking, oh no, I really wanted that soup. And you can see how all of these things, they're not on their own, they're not massive things, are they? They're quite small on their own. But when you add them all in, so each one is paying into that bucket. And our bucket may have started off fairly empty. If you've got a bucket this size, may have started off fairly empty. But each of these events is just pouring a little bit of water in, okay? You then get a nice lunch, you end up having fun with your friend, you sit there for way longer than you thought you were going to, you laugh, you have some nice coffees, and you're having such a good time. So good things can also pay into your bucket. So this nice lunch that you've had with your friend, that's paid in. You've laughed loads, like your cheek, you know when you laugh so much and your cheeks hurt here. You've got that, and then you and your friends say, do you know what, let's go for a nice walk around the park. So you go for a nice walk around the park and you meet a couple of dogs that you don't know, and we always have to say hello to the dogs, don't we? So you have a little play with some of the dogs, and again, all of this is adding into your bucket and you've had a really good time. Good things also pay into our bucket, okay? You then get home and you put your key in the lock, you go and turn it, the key snaps. And you know what? Too much. Your bucket is now that far off being full. The key snapping, emotional outburst, can't cope, and you just think, oh, I can't do this anymore. That is, it's life, isn't it? Life happens. Now, say for instance, you'd had a really chill day, not much had happened during your day, really relaxed. You go out, you come home, put your key in and the key snaps. And you might just go, oh, for goodness sake, that's really inconvenient. And you just think, oh, I'll just get it sorted. You cope with it totally differently. Now, that's us as humans. Dogs can be very, very similar with their buckets. I want to tell you the story of two dogs that I have worked with their owners. Now, the first one, when the owner phoned me, her first words to me just stopped me in my tracks. She said to me, I'm really scared I'm going to have my dog put to sleep. That is just, it's hideous. When you hear those words, you know, I felt the colour draining from my face and I just thought, oh gosh, this poor owner, what on earth has happened? So we started talking and thankfully, very, very quickly, I realised she did not need to have her dog put to sleep. And I could see that the outcome that I'll tell you about in a moment, that had all come from her dog having a full bucket and it filling, overflowed, and it was just an outburst. Now, she had told me that her dog normally was very chilled, happy, enjoyed life, you know, just the dream dog, as a lot of us have or a lot of us aspire to have. So when she said that her dog had bitten somebody, she said she was stunned. She didn't know where it had come from. She didn't know how it had happened. She was terrified that her dog was now a biter. So yeah, I think you can probably feel it. You probably, like me, when she was first telling me this, you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, that's awful. How did that happen to a dog that was thought to be the most calm, chilled, happy, adorable little dog? So what happened for this little dog is it had started a few days before. I think she said it was probably about 4 or 5 days before this happened. And her dog had, from nowhere, she's not sure what the cause was, but her dog had got a poorly tummy. So they had a day or so of sickness and diarrhea. She then took the dog to the vet and the dog had an anti-sickness injection. Came home, still feeling a bit, you know, not quite itself. And you know what it's like when we're poorly ourselves, or if, you know, you've seen your dogs be poorly, they're just not quite themselves, are they? They had a couple of days of just getting through this and recovering and, you know, then thinking everything is now sorted. So she then phoned her friend and said, let's go for a nice play at the park with the dogs. They met up at the park with her dog's favourite friend. They let the dogs off lead and the dogs were having a brilliant time. They were playing around, they were chasing each other, they were like bowling over each other and like daring each other and then chasing and all of this. You know what it's like. They were having a brilliant time. They were playing for about half an hour and then it was time to go home. Coming home for her was down quite a busy main road going through their village with quite a narrow path, and timing wise it just happened to coincide with when the schools were coming out. There was lots of young children with their parents and lots of noise, there was lots of cars, very, very busy. And again, quite a narrow, I know the village where she lives and I know this road, it's a very narrow path. So Let's recap quickly. Her dogs had been poorly. That's bucket filling. You know what it's like for you when you've been poorly. It fills your bucket. Been to the vets, that can be bucket filling for a lot of dogs. Had an injection, you know, that sometimes can be a little bit uncomfortable. Again, that's bucket filling. She then meets up with her friend at the park, has an amazing time, lots of fun. That is massively bucket filling. Then coming home from the park, and there's lots of stimulation. There are children everywhere, there's cars, there's noise, there's there was a few kids on scooters, she said, that were whizzing past, and she had to sort of keep like tucking her dog into the side and things like this just to get him out of the way. So this is all massively, massively bucket filling. They then had an ambulance come whizzing past them on sirens and blue lights. So again, massively bucket filling, lots of stimulus going on here. Now, if you think about that bucket, her dog's bucket, by this point, building up over several days and then lots happening on that same day, it's probably not that far off being pretty full. And then she noticed a man come running towards her, didn't think much about it. Her dog's never had an issue before with people, runners, other dogs, you know, never had any issues like this. So she didn't think anything of it. All she did was she just tightened the lead a little bit more because it was a narrow path and just brought her dog in a little bit closer to give the runner some space. And as he got level with them, her dog just turned and just nipped this man on the ankle. It did draw blood. It wasn't horrific. It obviously made the runner jump and shout out, and he obviously had to stop. And there was a little bit of blood. Now, for a dog owner that has never experienced anything like that before, and for it to be totally out of character for your dog, it's horrific, isn't it? I'm sure, you know, some of you may have been through something similar, and the rest of you might be sitting there going, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I would do in that situation. Thankfully, he was very, very understanding. I think from the way she described it, the blood made it look worse than it actually was. He did go to hospital just to get it checked out. He was a dog owner as well, and thankfully, he was very, very understanding. He didn't need stitches. She took his phone number, I think, and she said she spoke to him, and he didn't need stitches or anything. It was just, I think it was one of those ones where the blood made it look worse than it was. But the trauma was there for this owner. She spoke to me a few days later. She'd obviously been mulling it over for a few days, and she was beside herself. Now, what I was able to do is I was able to talk to her quite quickly and reassure her that everything she had described leading up to this was events and scenarios that had been filling her dog's bucket, and the bite was the full bucket. Now, not all dogs are going to bite when they have a full bucket. For some dogs, it might be that they just lunge and bark. For some dogs, they might just run off and forget that they've got a recall. For some dogs, they might suddenly just freeze when you're out walking, and they're just like, full bucket, I can't cope, I don't know what to do, and they literally just freeze. There's lots of different scenarios, so don't panic. A full bucket does not mean a bite. It was just for this particular dog, that's what happened. The other story I want to share with you, and this was a recall. Those of you that have ever had the experience where your dog has a really good recall and then something happens and suddenly it's like your dog's totally forgotten what their recall is all about. And you might be thinking, well, where on earth has that come from? Our recall is amazing. This is what happened to the second dog. Again, think about the bucket. As I'm telling the story, visualise a bucket and think, yeah, that sounds like bucket filling. Sounds bucket filling. What had happened is they had quite a busy Christmas. They have 2 young children. You can imagine Christmas Day with 2 young children. Very, very busy. The dog's toy, she said, as per usual, the dog ripped up the wrapping paper to its toy, killed the squeaker in about 2 minutes flat. I think we've all experienced that, haven't we? And you think, oh, why did I spend the money on that? So they had a really, really busy Christmas Day. They then had friends come and stay with them for several days between Christmas and New Year's Day. And their friends had 2 young children as well. The household went from 4 humans to 8 humans, plus the dog. It was a busy, busy time. Lots of things were happening for this dog. First of all, the normal sleep patterns were massively interrupted. Okay, with a busy household like that, it was really hard for this dog to get their normal sort of deep, proper sleep, even throughout the day. Lots going on. There was 4 children rather than 2. And the other 2 children, they did not have a dog. So it was total novelty to be in a house for a couple of days with this dog. So they were playing non-stop with this little dog. The dog was enjoying it, having an amazing time playing with all these children in the garden constantly, playing in the house, and they were having an amazing time. In the evenings, this dog suddenly had 4 humans, 4 adults, sat down on the chairs, on the sofas, playing, giving them cuddles and, lots of chatter and all this sort of going on. So again, evenings, which were normally snuggled on the sofa with mum and dad, weren't really happening. So again, a lot less sleep. And then New Year's Eve. Now, normally she was saying to me that typically on a New Year's Eve, they don't really do very much. They're normally in bed before the fireworks go off. The children normally sleep through the fireworks and the dog's not normally that fussed by them. So this New Year's Eve, because they had the friends staying, they decided, we're all going to stay up for the fireworks. The children can stay up. The children were super excited about the fireworks. They were out in the garden. They had food and drinks and everything. And the dog was getting more and more hyped up because of the excitement before the fireworks started. So when the fireworks did start, it actually was quite overwhelming for the dog. And she said she was really surprised because whereas previously her dog's not really been fussed by fireworks, he was actually a little bit worried. And a few times he ran into the house when the fireworks were going off and they were trying to encourage him to come back out so he could be with them. And he was not having any of it. And she said he was quite frightened. And she just thought, it's just one of those things. Didn't think it was an issue as such because this is the first time it had ever happened. But again, if you think about that bucket. Next morning, they all decided to go for a nice long dog walk just to, fresh air, let's wake ourselves up. Had not got much sleep the night before. Let's go for a nice long dog walk. So they went for this lovely dog walk. New Year's Day, everyone goes for a dog walk, don't they? So they went for a lovely long dog walk. And she said they entered into a really, really big field. So they let their dog off and the children were racing around and chasing each other and they were encouraging the dog. So dog was running around with them as well. And then all of a sudden, she said, the field was massive. And she said over far, far on the other side, they knew there was a gate and that's where they were heading. And coming through that gate, they could see some people coming through with what she thought was maybe 3 or 4 other dogs, but they were so far in the distance, she couldn't actually see how many dogs there were. She wasn't that worried because she said it was way off in the distance and her dog has an amazing recall. And then she said it happened. And you're probably guessing. Her dog shot off after the other dogs and no amount of calling could bring their dog back. It was as if the recall was totally non-existent. And she said her and her husband took off after the dog a lot slower, as you can imagine. And she said before she knew it, her dog was with these other people, with the dogs. And thankfully, as they were getting closer, they could see the dogs were just all having fun. Now, if any of these other dogs had been reactive or took offence to her dog, this could have gone so, so horribly wrong. Thankfully, the other dogs were really friendly and playful and the other people, they could see what was happening. So they started walking towards her and sort of met them in the middle of the field. And she said the lead went firmly on. And she said they walked home and they were mortified because this had never happened before. A few days later, that's when she phoned me and she said to me, how have we lost the recall? We have an amazing recall. And it was as if it had just totally gone. And what I said to her is, as we were chatting and she was telling me all about what happened sort of between Christmas and New Year's Day when it happened, is I was saying to her, all of these little events had been filling her dog's bucket and the sudden, almost full bucket, probably this far off, the dog then saw the other dogs and went, oh, new friends. And it was just bucket overflow, massive excitement, and her dog was just off. So you can see from these 2 different scenarios how different events can fill a dog's bucket and how you can get two totally different scenarios from a full bucket that overflows. Have a think about it with your dog. Have you ever experienced any events where you're like, oh my gosh, what on earth's just happened? Or that's never happened before. Where's that come from? I quite often get this with owners of reactive dogs, where they will ask me the question of, why is my dog reactive on some walks and on other walks they're absolutely fine? Now, the majority of the time, the answer to that is to do with their bucket. So if they've got a fairly empty bucket and you go on a walk and they're quite calm, they're quite chilled, they see other dogs and they're not really that fussed by them, and you think, oh, that was a really good walk. And then you go on another walk and it's horrendous. And you think, where's that come from? You know, this morning's walk was amazing. Now, it's more often than not to do with the bucket. So I'll give you one scenario, and I'm sure you will think of others with your dog. If you have a dog where you can take them for a walk in the morning, they've had a good night's sleep. Sleep really helps to empty the bucket. We'll talk more about how to empty the bucket in a moment. Sleep really helps to empty the bucket. You wake up in the morning, you pop your clothes on and you go for a walk, and your dog's quite chilled, really, happy, sees the neighbour's dog and is fine and all of this. And you come home and you think, oh, that was a really good walk. Then lots happen throughout the day. Maybe your dog's a bit reactive to the postie. Postie comes and your dog gets a little bit excited and races up to the door. That fills the bucket a little bit. Then maybe you start playing some games in the house and you start playing tug of war in the garden with them, and that fills their bucket again. So these are good things, this is a good thing, but it fills your dog's bucket a little bit. And then maybe you get yourself some lunch and your dog comes down and is like, oh, what's for me? What's in the fridge? And they're harassing you while you're eating your cheese sandwich because they're like, cheese, I really need some of this cheese of yours. And again, that's filling their bucket even more. And then just things happen throughout the day, don't they? Maybe you've had a couple more deliveries that have, again, filled your dog's bucket a little bit more. So you then go for your evening walk. Now, your evening walk with your dog, you take them out, and within 5 minutes, they're pulling a bit more on the lead, and you see another dog and they're like, rah, 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 rah. And you're thinking, where's that come from? This morning you were fine. It's because their bucket is fuller. It sounds simple, and the answer is actually quite straightforward. What we need to do in scenarios like this is we need to help our dogs empty their bucket. If you think about your bucket, and rather than these events building on top of each other and the bucket's just filling, what we need to do is, as these events happen, because life's life, isn't it? We can't stop things from happening that are going to fill our buckets. What we need to do, though, at the same time, is we need to have something that is also going to empty the bucket. So if you imagine the bucket's got a hole, we need some things happening throughout our day to help empty our bucket. Now, if this is us as humans, we know sometimes if we're feeling a little bit stressed and something's happened and we think, okay, I just need to sit down, I just need to take 5 minutes. Maybe you might do some meditation, you might do some breathing techniques, you might sit down and just read a book for 5-10 minutes because that helps to calm you down a little bit. We naturally will do lots of these things ourselves because we can feel it in ourselves, can't we? We can feel when we're getting a little bit stressed, or we're just getting a bit overwhelmed by life. Now, for our dogs, we need to help them with that. They can't always empty their own bucket. We can help them with that, though. A couple of the things that we can do here, I'm going to pop a little infographic up here, and it talks about what fills the bucket, okay, with some of the scenarios that we've looked at, and then we're going to look at how we can empty our dog's bucket. So these are a couple, there's lots more that I talk about with clients. These are some of them. So things like getting some good quality sleep, that is massive. Think about sleep, the difference of you having a nap on the sofa with a busy household and people coming in and out of the living room disturbing you the whole time. You don't get a good nap, do you? Whereas if you go up into your bedroom, close the door, close the curtains, lay down on your bed, you are going to get a much better, even if it's just 20 minutes, you're going to get a much better little nap, aren't you? And it's the same for our dogs. So think about where your dog naps throughout the day. Do they actually have a good quality sleep? You are then going to also have things like licking. Now, licking releases those calming endorphins, same as sniffing. What you can do is, if you can see that your dog's bucket is getting quite full, you can just grab a frozen lick mat or a frozen Kong out of the freezer, pop that down for them, and as they're licking that, they're going to be naturally emptying their bucket a little bit. Now, I love frozen for many reasons. When we're in hot weather, it helps cool them down. It also gives you duration because it takes them much longer to get through, and they are licking it. So you are getting those calming endorphins being released into their system, which is massive. So that's a really good one. Sleep, licking, sniffing, they're really good. The other one that I like to talk to owners about is actually postponing walks. So if you can see that your dog has had quite a full-on day, or maybe they're just a bit more agitated, they're a bit more aware, hyper aware of everything that's going on, and you can see they're a bit more jittery, that's a good sign that their bucket is quite full. So in scenarios like that, what I do, and what I also encourage my owners to do, is to actually postpone walks. A dog does not need to go for a walk. If they're already quite full with their bucket, if they're already quite stressed, you can stay at home. You could play some games in the garden, you can play some games in the house. They don't have to go for a walk, because if you do take them for a walk, there are so many things out on that walk that are out of your control. Other dogs, other cars whizzing past, bicycles, motorcycles, buses, cats. There's so many things that could happen that are out of your control, and we're almost setting our dog up for failure if we take them out and they've got a relatively full bucket, because we're saying to them, I know your bucket is that far off being overflowing. We're going to go out, but I still want you to behave. That's a lot to ask of a dog. So let's set them up for a success. If we can see that their bucket is fairly full, let's just stay home. Let's help them empty their bucket, and we'll go out for a walk tomorrow when their bucket is a bit emptier. Also think about rehearsal, which I talk about a lot. If you've watched some of my other videos, I'll pop some links into some videos where I talk about rehearsal. Rehearsal is massive. Think about if you were to take your dog out for a walk and you can see that their bucket is that far off being full. You take them out for a walk and they're reactive, or they're hypervigilant, or they're pulling more on the lead because they're a bit more jittery and they want to get there, and they're everything's going a bit faster for them because of where their bucket is. Say that happens on 60% of their walks. What happens is their brain is rehearsing, when I go on walks, this is how I behave. Now, what a dog rehearses, they become. So let's use pulling, for example. Now, I know dogs where they pull a lot more when their buckets are fairly full. So if you take a dog out for a walk and it's constantly rehearsing pulling, and you're trying to say to them, no, come here, walk here, no, walks, stay here with me, walk slower. So you're then building up that conflict of them pulling, you pulling back, them pulling, and you get this constant conflict, don't you? So you're going to be more stressed. And your dog is rehearsing, when I am on walks, I pull. So I hope that's all making a lot of sense. It's something I love talking to owners about. It's something that I love helping them with. Your dog's bucket is massive. When I speak with new clients, the number one question that is normally going through my own mind is, what fills this dog's bucket? Or if it was a one-off event, like the 2 stories I shared, what happened to fill and literally overflow, explode that dog's bucket? So if you would like to know more, I do online Zoom training, one-to-one if you're local, if you're here in the Chilterns. If you are further afield, we can work one-to-one on Zoom, and it works so well together. So I'm going to pop some details here for you. You can get in touch with me and we can help your dog. I can help you work out what fills your dog's bucket and what can you do to support your dog, set them up for success. So actually when they're going out into the world, we're taking them out with a fairly low bucket, a fairly empty bucket, and we are then setting them up for success.